Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Learning Room. This is Lecture 18 of our crash course in Morphology. In this video, we will talk about 15 morphology concepts students always forget star. These 15 concepts that students often encounter, but that don't always receive a full lecture of their own. First, we will talk about rule-governed processes. These are word formation processes that follow identifiable morphological patterns and can be applied to new words. These patterns are regular and predictable. These patterns can be described through rules and applied to create new words. Because speakers are familiar with these rules, they can often understand or form words they have never encountered before. For example, by adding the suffix "er" to a verb, we can create an agent noun that refers to the person performing the action, as in teach, teacher, and read, reader. Similarly, the suffix "ness" can be added to adjectives to form nouns, as in happy, happiness, and kind, kindness. The rule can be generalized as verb plus agent noun. Since these word formations follow systematic and predictable patterns that can be repeatedly applied to new words, they are considered rule-governed processes and are typically associated with productive word formation in a language. Next is non-rule-governed processes. These morphological processes do not follow fixed, regular, or fully predictable rules for word formation. Unlike rule-governed processes, these do not allow speakers to freely create new words using a consistent pattern. Instead, the formation of such words is often irregular, context-dependent, or historically motivated. Examples include borrowing, clipping, blending, in some cases, acronyms, and coinage. For instance, in blending, words such as brunch, breakfast plus lunch, and smog, smoke plus fog, are created by combining parts of existing words. But there is no fixed rule that systematically tells speakers how to form all such blends. Similarly, there is no productive morphological rule that allows speakers to generate unlimited new words in the same way as adding the suffix "ness." Therefore, these processes are considered non-rule governed because they lack consistent, productive patterns that can be universally applied. Next is loanwords and borrowed words. Many students often assume that loanword and borrowed word refer to two different categories, but linguistically they describe the same phenomenon. Both terms refer to a word that has been taken from one language and incorporated into another. For example, Urdu has borrowed the word school from English, and in this context, school is considered a loanword in Urdu. Therefore, it is correct to say that every loanword is essentially a borrowed word. The term loanword itself is metaphorical because in reality languages do not return the words they borrow. Several linguists have pointed out that the term loan is not perfectly accurate, since nothing is actually given back once a word enters another language system. Now let's explore the concept of the donor language and source language. The notion donor language refers to the language that provides a word to another language during the process of borrowing. In other words, it is the language from which a lexical item is taken. For example, if Turkish language borrows the word computer from English, then English language is considered the donor language because it is the source of the borrowed item. The term source language is also commonly used in the same sense as donor language, and both are often used interchangeably in linguistic studies. Thus, in the example of computer, English functions as both the donor language and the source language. Next is the recipient language or beneficiary language. It is the language that receives a word from another language during the process of borrowing. For example, if English language provides the word computer to Turkish, then Turkish language functions as the recipient language because it adopts the borrowed lexical item into its own system. Some linguists also use the term beneficiary language to emphasize the idea that the receiving language benefits by expanding its vocabulary through borrowing. In this sense, Turkish can be described as a beneficiary language since it gains new lexical resources through contact with other languages. However, in morphology and language context studies, the term recipient language is more widely accepted and commonly used than beneficiary language. An important point often missed by students is that productivity in morphology is not a simple binary distinction between productive and unproductive. Instead, it exists on a continuum, meaning that different morphological processes can show varying degrees of productivity. At one end of this continuum are highly productive processes. This means the processes which can freely be used to create new words without restriction. Such processes are considered highly productive processes. These processes are actively used by speakers in everyday language formation. For examples of highly productive processes include the suffix -ness, the suffix -er, and the prefix -un. These can be applied to a wide range of bases to form new words such as unread, unhappy, and unclear, demonstrating their flexibility and productivity in modern English. Second degree is moderately productive morphological processes. These are the processes that operate in some linguistic environments but cannot be applied universally to all possible bases. In other words, their use is partially restricted and they do not freely attach to every suitable word. These processes show productivity, but it is limited compared to highly productive patterns. Examples include the suffix ity and the verb-forming suffix "-ize". Words such as modernize and nationalize illustrate how "-ize" can be used to form verbs from certain adjectives or nouns. However, not all adjectives can naturally take these affixes, which shows that their application is restricted and context-dependent rather than fully general. Lastly, we have low or unproductive morphological processes. These are the processes that are rarely used in present-day language for the creation of new words. These processes may exist in the language as part of its historical development, but they are no longer actively used by speakers to form new lexical items. As a result, their productivity is very limited or almost absent. A common example is the suffix th, which is found in words such as warmth, length, and breadth. Although these words are part of the vocabulary, speakers do not generally use the suffix th to create new words in modern usage, which shows that it has very low productivity in contemporary morphology. Now let's find the answer of the question that why do languages borrow words? The linguist Braj B. Kachru discussed borrowing within the framework of language contact and identified two major motivations behind why languages borrow words. The first is need-based borrowing. It occurs when a language adopts a word because it does not already have an existing term for a new concept, object, or technological innovation. In such cases, borrowing helps fill a lexical gap in the recipient language. For example, words like computer, internet, and software were borrowed because these concepts were new and required naming within many languages. Thus, need-based borrowing plays an important role in expanding the vocabulary of a language to accommodate new realities and developments. Second is prestige-based borrowing. It occurs when words are adopted from another language not because of a lexical gap, but due to the social, cultural, educational, political, or economic status of the donor language. In such cases, the donor language is considered prestigious, and its vocabulary is often associated with modernity, authority, or higher social value. As a result, speakers may prefer using borrowed terms even when equivalent native words already exist in their own language. For example, in Urdu language, English words such as meeting, status, office, and interview are frequently used alongside or instead of native equivalents. This reflects the high prestige of English in many professional and educational contexts. Thus, prestige-based borrowing highlights the influence of social status and power relations between languages in shaping vocabulary choice. That's all for today's lecture. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next lecture.